Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back. Today's Daf is Yevamos Tzadik Aleph. We are holding on Tzadik Amud Beis, right on the bottom. Hoysa Bas Yisrael Niftzala Min HaKahuna V'chulu. This Isha remarried. Turns out her husband is alive. We apply all types of penalties and fines. She leaves both husbands. She loses all rights to Truma, to Masar, to Kesuba. Asks the Gemara Pshita, of course. Obviously, Rashi says, look, she was an Eshesh Ish who went and married a stranger. Zainahi. Of course, if she's a Zaina, she loses the status of kashrus. She can't marry a Kayan. Answers the Gemara. Bas Levi min ha-Masar itzrichale. The Chiddush isn't necessarily the Bas Yisrael who cannot marry a Kohen. The Chiddush is the next halacha. She's from a Levi family. This episode downgrades her, doesn't allow her access to Maser going forward. And that's the Chiddush. And on account of that, we mentioned the first halacha as well. Asks the Gemara, well, why can't she access Maser? Ubas Levi min ha-Maser? Min mipsala biznus? Does a zinus experience invalidate the Bas Levi from eating Maser? There's no halacha that a Zoyna cannot partake in Maser Rishon. Vatanya, we have a Braisa, Lavia Shed Nishbis, an Isha from a Levi family, who was captured. We're concerned there was some sort of interaction with a Goy. She was involved in Znus. She can be fed Maser Rishon. You're right. Typically, a Levia can still eat Maser Rishon. Here, since she was careless in her behavior, she went and married a stranger before verifying, before confirming her husband's whereabouts. We apply a knas, we fine her, we take away the Maser Rishon. Bas Kohen min ha-Truma. If she was from a Kohen family, she loses Truma rights. And the Chiddush here is evidently not regular Truma because that's Pashut. We said that the Isha loses even Maser Rishon privileges. Of course, Truma, which is higher. There's no Chiddush. Answers the Gemara, Afilu b'Truma d'Rabbanan, even if it's only Truma d'Rabbanan. How can you have Truma d'Rabbanan? Oh, let's say you have an otzitz, she'enei nakav, an unperforated flower pot, which is technically considered detached from the ground. Anything that grows within it is not chayiv min haTorah, only midrabanan. Even that truma cannot be fed to this isha. The Mishnah says, firstly, she loses all ksuba claims, and then the Mishnah says, well, the Yershim on either side, the Ruvain side, Shimon's side, first husband, second husband, those Yershim will not get her ksuba. Ksuba, my avidita. How do you have a ksuba to begin with? I thought she loses her ksuba. Amar Papa. Ksubas benin dichron. Rashi explains this as a whole arrangement where the banin dichron, the zecharim, would get a greater portion than the other brothers. Meaning, suppose you have Reuven who married Rachel. Now she brought in possessions, and they wrote it into the ksuba as part of the ksuba arrangement. Then she passed away, Rachel. Of course, she has some children, and she passed away. Then Reuven married Leah, and he passed away first. So now, technically, all the children should share all the properties because they're Yerush, this father. But Chachamim made a takana to encourage a father to be generous when it comes time to marry of his daughter, to give her all kinds of possessions and belongings to bring into the marriage. So they were masakin a takana called Ksubas benin dichron, where she states in the Ksuba, this is Rachel in this case, she wants her boys, upon Reuven's passing, she wants her boys to have exclusive access to the items that she brought into the marriage. So the Chiddush of the Mishnah is, no, we don't fulfill this wish, we don't keep this arrangement, this is not a proper marriage. Well, Pshita, of course. If the Ksuva becomes nullified, if all the ksuba claims are non-existent, then this is part of the ksuba. Why would you think this is different? No, the tema, perhaps I would say, lididod of the isura, the isha herself, Rachel, who did an isur, committed something wrong by just carelessly going and marrying a stranger. Kansura Rabbanan Chachamim applied a fine, a penalty, a knas. They took away her ksuba, but once she is no longer here, it's just a question of her sons claiming her possessions. Lizara to her sons, Kansura Rabbanan Chachamim perhaps did not apply a knas. Kamashmon the chiddush is yes. Anything that's associated with the ksuba commitment becomes cancelled. Mishnah continues. If either husband, Reuven, the first husband, the real husband, or Shimon, the newcomer, pass away without any children, so Reuven's brother, in the case of Shimon, his brother, will do chalitza but not yibum. Explains the Gemara. Achav shel rishon. In terms of Reuven's brother, chalitz medayraisa. Chalitza is mandated, not Torah, because technically she's Reuven's wife. When he passes on, his brother needs to do chalitza, v'loy miyabim, but not yibum. That's midrabanan. We don't allow yibum. It's a knas. Achiv shel sheni, in terms of Shimon's brother, upon Shimon's passing without children, there, since he wasn't really her husband, chalitz midrabanan. Sure, he does chalitza, but that's only midrabanan. As Rashi explains, Minat Torah, she's not really his Yevamos. She wasn't really married to Shimon. The whole thing was a mistake to begin with, but it appears that perhaps she was his wife, so we do chalitza, v'loy miyabim, but of course not yibim, loy midoyrayis, v'loy midarabanan, not allowed Minat Torah or midarabanan, because yibim has no place in this case. Rabbi Yossi Omer, ksubasa al nichsei balarish. So perhaps let's just take a quick look at the Mishnah again, and that Peizayinim and Beis. You have the introduction, the Isha whose husband passed away, left town, she thought he passed away, she remarried, comes back, all types of penalties are applied. Now we have three names in the Mishnah, starting with Rabbi Yossi, over to Rabbi Lazar, down to Rabbi Shimon. They all take issue with the blanket halacha in the Mishnah. They limit the penalties. Rabbi Yossi says, ksuba, sure, she gets ksuba from Reuven, the first husband. Rabbi Lazar says, Reuven, sure, he can get her mitzvah, her earnings, he can override her nedarim, he keeps those rights. Rabbi Shimon, the third Shita, says, in terms of a yibum situation, so Reuven's brother can do yibum or chalitza. So recap, we have Rabbi Yossi who says she gets ksuba. Rabbi Lazar says the first husband gets her mitzvah, her masi yodayim. Rabbi Shimon says in terms of yibum, we treat her as Reuven's wife. Reuven's brother will do bia or chalitza. Amrav Huna. Is there any machlekes, any difference of opinion between these shitas? Meaning, do they agree or disagree with each other? Basroi, the later ones, the more recent ones, the bottom ones, moidul kamay, they agree with the previous ones. Kamay, but the earlier ones, loy moidul basroi, don't agree with the later ones. Meaning, we have Rabbi Yossi, number 1, Rabbi Lazar, number 2, Rabbi Shimon, number 3. So Rabbi Shimon, who's number 3, moidil Rabbi Lazar, agrees with Rabbi Lazar. That what? Rabbi Shimon says that Yibum applies. He agrees with Rabbi Lazar as well that while everyone's around, Reuven can get her mitzvah. If she finds something, he gets it, her earnings he keeps, etc. So Rabbi Shimon agrees with that as well. Although he only mentioned Yibum, but he agrees with the halacha presented by the previous Tana as well. Why? How do we know this? Simple logic. The ma'biyah, the ikari surah, if Rabbi Shimon allows Yibum to be applied, which involves a biyah, which is really the essence of the whole core issue here. Right? The whole upheaval was as a result of some improper interaction with biyah. So even in terms of this type of experience, like Konis, he doesn't suspend the Yibum. He allows it to go forward. Certainly monetary issues like his rights in her findings and her earnings, of course, will allow Reuven to keep that. For Rabbi Lezer, however, he's the second Tana, loy moidi le Rabbi Shimon. He will not agree with Tana number 3. That Yibum is activated. Do you know why? When it comes to monetary issues, fine, let it go. Aval bia di surahu kanis. But bia that's interacting as married, that we don't allow in this case. We apply a knas. Since she got married inappropriately, we suspend that option and no yibum is applied. So number 3 agrees with number 2, but not number 2 with number 3. And both v'tavayu, number 2 and number 3, Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shimon, they agree with Rabbi Yossi, who's number 1, that she receives a ksuva upon leaving husband Ruvain. To say like kanis, because if these halachas, which halachas? Yibum, or certainly the mitzvah on the masiyah dea, which is something that's related to the marriage experience. Hani, these items, the yasva to say, which are a direct result of this continuous involvement with Ruvain. The Yibum as well is because she was still married to him. That's why upon his passing, she's a Yevamos to his brother. So these items, these halachas are related to the continuous marriage experience. Like kanis. They allow it. They don't apply a knas. They keep it in place. The koshkin ksuba, of course, the ksuba, which Rabbi Yossi speaks about, the lemishkal umeipak koi, which is meant to be claimed on your way out of the marriage. Of course, that you can take. However, Rabbi Yossi, who's on top, who's number 1, who spoke about allowing her the ksuba upon her leaving the marriage, perhaps wouldn't agree with the other shittas. For Rabbi Yossi, he wouldn't agree to them, that we keep those elements of that marriage in place, because there's a big difference between ksuba the lemishkal umeipaku, ksuba which was meant to be received on your way out of the marriage, like kanas, that he allows. Right? Because the whole point is to leave the marriage. You're leaving, you're on the way out. May as well take that ksuba. The lemishkal umeipaku, the like kanas, aval hani, but these elements that are discussed by Rabbi Lezer or Shimon, conventional, marriage arrangement components. You have the ksuva, you have, the mitzvah, the masiyah dayim, the verse nadarim, or yibum, which is also a direct result of this continuous relationship. Aval haned yasva to say, but those which are related to the actual marriage and the continuation of that marriage, kanis, perhaps Rabbi Yossi would apply a knas that would not allow it. We don't want to encourage this marriage. So we have Rav Huna's version, which is as follows. You have Rabbi Yossi number 1, Rabbi Lezer number 2, Rabbi Shimon number 3. He says the later ones agree to the earlier ones, but not the earlier one to the later ones. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, he goes the other way around. He says, Kamai, Moidul Basroi, the earlier ones agree with the later ones. Basroi lo Moidul Kamai, but the later ones don't agree with the earlier ones. And he explains. Rabbi Yossi, who's number 1, gives up the ksuba, Moidi Leila Rabbi Lezer. He agrees with Rabbi Lezer that husband is entitled to her masiyah dayim, her earnings, etc. You know why? Think of it a bit differently. Ksuba de mididei lidida. Who pays the ksuba? That payout is coming from him to her. Still, loikanis. We don't see he's concerned. He doesn't suspend it, even though she's actually gaining now. We don't penalize her. We let her have it. Kolshkin, of course. But kolshkin mitziyasa masiyadeh. Of course, those things, those earnings, which are going the other way, which are coming from her to him. Of course, why should we penalize him? What did he do wrong? So Rabbi Yossi agrees with Rabbi Lezer that he gets the mitzvah and the masiyah. However, for Rabbi Lezer, there's a gersa Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Lezer is the second Tana, doesn't agree with Rabbi Yossi, the first Tana, that she's entitled to ksuba. There's a big difference. Those items which are going from her to him, like kanis, he doesn't suspend that. Ksuba, but the ksuba claim which is coming from him to her, that's money coming from him to her, kanis, perhaps there, he wouldn't allow her that money. Both these Tanoim Number one, Rabbi Yossi, number two, Rabbi Elazar agrees with Rabbi Shimon that Yibum is applied upon his passing. You know why? It's a kolshken, kavachaymer, umahani, the mechayim, loikansi. If we see that when it comes to kesuba payout, when it comes to other monetary claims, mitzia, masiyadeh, he leaves it intact. Even though it's sort of encouraging this relationship. Of course, biyah lachar misa lakoshkin, certainly after passing, we should allow the biyah of Yibum to take place. Now, Reb Shimon, however, Reb Shimon was number three, who allows Yibum loy moidilu, doesn't agree with their chiddush, that we allow the ksuba and all that to stay in place. Because davka biyah lachar misa lekonis, only biyah which is Yibum related after misa, that we keep in place. Because that's already post-marriage. Aval hani de mechayim, kanes bar ksuba, and all the other payouts, all the privileges which are applicable during their lifetime, that he suspends, he cancels, in order to unravel this marriage. So it appears that all agree that they're not meant to stay married. There's a knas. She did an isser. She didn't investigate the matter thoroughly, and therefore we don't allow her to go back to Reuven. But in the interim, he'll get the mitzia, the masiyadayim. On the way out, she can get the ksuba, and after his passing, perhaps Yibum will be activated, and depends whose shita we're following. Continues the Gemara. This is Shlebershus. So we have two parts of the Mishnah. In the ratio, we spoke about one aide testifying about Reuven's passing, which prompted her to remarry. Turns out he was gravely mistaken. That's called Birushus Bezdin. She was allowed to marry by way of Bezdin, who applied this heter. He said, look, we are relying on you. Right? That's the thinking behind this heter, as the Gemara explained. Right? They're relying on her. That she'll investigate thoroughly. Turns out she was mistaken. You should have done a better job. Should have been more conscientious. And therefore we apply all types of fines and penalties and isurim. She leaves Shimon, there's no husband. She doesn't go back to Reuven. She gets a get from Reuven and Shimon. Why from Shimon? Because it appears that she was married to him, so we require a get. Which is really also a part of the penalty process, going through this uncomfortable get situation from Shimon. So that's the first part of the Mishnah. This is Alpi, the Eid Echad, which is really the Bezdin's heter. That's, by the way, why she doesn't bring a carbon. So it's almost an irony. Here we're faulting her. But at the same time, the fact is Bezdin did initiate that process. They relied on her. But they initiated, so it's called a Yachid She'asa B'Hiraz Bezdin. A person sins on account of Bezdin's instruction. There's no carbon. We're not saying he's faultless. We're not absolving him. But there's a special halacha of Bezdin initiated the process, there's no carbon. But otherwise, she's usher to both husbands, etc. However, the Mishnah continues. Suppose there was no Bezdin involved. Two Eidim came along and told her, look, we're testifying to you about your husband's passing. In that case, you don't really need a heter Bezdin. Look, I have two Eidim to rely on. Why would she have to investigate further? I have two witnesses. The highest form of ne'emanus. I trust them. She can go remarry, and if it turns out that it was a mistake, she just goes back to Reuven, the first husband. And actually, Reb Shimon's name is affixed to this scenario. He's the one who presents this halacha that if it was a remarriage by way of two Eidim, we don't apply the Isser, the Knas, we don't fine her, we don't penalize her, go back to husband number one. Amar Punam Rav, in fact, that's how we paskin lamais. Rav Nachman responds to him, Ganva Genuvi Lamlach, why do you have to sort of steal this halacha? Present it as your own. Look, Isvir Lach Kreb Shimon, if you're following Reb Shimon, that's how you hold. Just say it out. Ema halach Kreb Shimon. Just say we've passed like Reb Shimon. Why do you have to present it as a new halach? Reb Shimon ka'azla. Because in fact, that's all you're saying. You're following Reb Shimon. Perhaps there's a concern. I'll tell you why I didn't just say that. Because Had I only said halacha Rabbi Shimon, mashma would sound like I'm following Rabbi Shimon totally. Afilu b'kamaisa, even that first halacha as we had before, that in the case of the one aid, where she really is at fault, still Rabbi Shimon says upon Ruvain's passing there is the yibum done. So if I would only say halacha Rabbi Shimon, perhaps you would just bundle them together and follow Rabbi Shimon in both halachas. And I wanted to avoid that misconception, and that's why I focused only on this halacha. And I said, you know what? This is the halacha. If there were Edom involved, she's exempt, she's absolved. Well, then you should have said, Ema, halacha Rabbi Shimon b'achroina. We follow Rabbi Shimon's second halacha. Should have been clear and just given Rabbi Shimon credit. Kasha, we'll leave it as an unresolved kasha. Amar Rav Sheshes. I want to know something else. Amina, I'm figuring ki nayim v'shachav Rav. When Rav was sleeping, Amra la Hashmata, that's when he said this halacha. That what? That if two Edom come and she remarries on account of that testimony, she's absolved of all wrongdoing, she can just go back home. Go back to Reuven, the first husband. Halacha Mekal de Pligi? Why do you need to paskin, lamaisa, halacha Rabbi Shimon? Halacha, this is the halacha. Apparently, there's somebody arguing. Is that an indication that there's any opposing view? My havala lememad. How could anybody falter? How could anybody deem her guilty? What should she have done? To aid him. Came and told her about her husband's passing. Me anis answer. She's totally faultless. It's an inus. Interesting that the Chavas Yer says that Rav Sheshes wasn't trying to insult Rav. Quite the opposite. This isn't up to standards, to your lofty standards, Rav. This must have been said in your sleep. It's not. This is not befitting somebody of your stature. In any case, you're indicating that there's machlekes. How could there be machlekes? How could anybody fault her? There were two Edom. I came and told her an absolute fact that her husband passed away. That's number one. So it's a svara. V'oitanya. We have another brisa where this halacha is presented. And the Gemara is assuming that this is an agreed upon halacha. Everybody is mask, everybody is moed, even the Rabbana. So why do you even have to get involved with halacha is this, halacha is that? It's so simple and pashut and self-evident. The Brisa says, Kol haroisha b'Torah, ein tzricha yisei menu get. Any type of arayis interaction with a relative, etc. It's an avera, but you don't issue a get from that other person, from that erva, as a result of the avera. No get is required, but chutz me'eshes ish, except for a married woman, shenisas al pi bezdin, who remarried on account of bezdin, which basically means an eid echad came to testify about her husband's passing. Bezdin gave her the stamp, go ahead and get married, relying on her investigative abilities, which turned out to be incomplete. In this case, as we learned in the Mishnah, she leaves the next husband, she leaves the first husband. She needs a get from the new husband as well, because it appears that she married him. She can't just walk away. We have to have a get. Oh, Alpi Bezdin, only in this case where it was 1/8, where she's faulted. We take her to task. Now she's in trouble. She needs a get from Shimon. She can't marry Reuven again. She's burnt on all sides. But Alpi Edom, suppose there were 2 Edom, in which case Bezdin is not really involved. She's an oines. She's totally not at fault. Loi boya gita. In this case, she just goes back to Reuven. No need to issue a get from Shimon. It's as if nothing ever happened. So Gemara is assuming this is even the Chachamim speaking. There's no machlekes. This is a universal opinion, and therefore this is a kash on you, Rav. Why do you have to even mention that this is the halacha? Everybody agrees. It's an oines. So the Gemara will actually analyze this brisa and try to prove that this is Shitas Rabbanan. We're going to go back and forth. At the end of the day, we aren't really going to prove it as fact. Okay, let's see. Mani, who's speaking? Who's the author of this brisa, which seems to say that there's a difference between a heter that came through one aid, where she's in trouble if it turns out to be false. She's usher on both husbands. She needs a get from both husbands, as opposed to a heter that was generated by two Adam, where she is considered an oinus. She's not taken to task. She's not usher to Ruvain. There's no get from Shimon. Everything is fine and dandy. Elaim Rab Shimon. Is it Rab Shimon speaking? It can't be. It must be the Rabban. It can't be Rab Shimon. Because, according to Rab Shimon, even if there was only one aid involved, Rab Shimon doesn't hold to this whole get thing. Sure, she's penalized. Sure, she's held accountable for what happened. She can't go back to Ruvain, but he doesn't hold to the get. We don't have Shimon, the new husband, issue a get, because, if anything, it makes it worse. That's Rab Shimon's thinking. Then it appears like she was really married to Shimon. We don't want to create that impression. Rab Shimon api bezdin mi by a get. According to Rab Shimon, Rab Shimon api bezdin mi by a get, even if it was only one aid, which basically means the bezdin gave the allowance, gave the authorization to go and remarry. Even in that case where she's held accountable, no get is applied. Rab Shimon says the following formula, where it appears he doesn't hold it a get. He said like this: Asu bezdin bayra asan kezadoin ish bi isha. The Chachamim considered a situation which was created by the hayra'ah of bezdin. Basically, if there was an eid echad and bezdin confirmed that heter, turns out it was mistaken, they considered it like kezadoin ish bi isha, as if somebody interacted with an Eshes Ish willfully, bezadeh. And what happens then? When an Eshes Ish commits nus, she can't go back home. Al pi Edom, however, if the heter came about through Edom, who testified about her husband's passing, then we don't apply the Isser, kishigigas ish bi isha. It's as though a person interacted with an Eshes Ish. Bishgaga, it was a mistake. And she doesn't become usher on her husband, she can go back home. That's Reb Shimon's formula. That's how he packages it. Here she's held accountable, here not. Right? One aid, it's her fault. You should have looked into the matter better. Two aidim, it's not your fault. From the fact that Reb Shimon compares our situation to znus, either b'mezid or b'shegig, he seems to be telling us that idi v'idi loy boya get, in either situation, no get is applied, because by znus we don't do a get. So clearly Reb Shimon doesn't hold to the get component. And the brisa that we mentioned before that discusses get, when she got the heter through one aid, we penalize her, including the get. Two aid, we don't penalize her. No get. It's not Reb Shimon speaking. By him there's never get. So it's the Rabbanan. Oh, clearly the Rabbanan hold of that chiluk, that by two Eidim, she's faultless. She's an oinus. She doesn't suffer the consequences. Elalav Rabbanan here, right? Apparently that brisa is the Rabbanan. This is all part of Reb Shesh's kasha and Rav. Why did you have to get involved in this whole discussion? It's clear, it's pasha, that even the Rabbanan agreed that by two Eidim she's faultless. She's totally absolved. Says the Gemara, no. We got to keep track here. Says the Gemara, no. Reb Shimon here. Perhaps the Rabbanan would not absolve her, even when it was two Eidim. That brisa that absolves her, or that seems to absolve her, that's Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon, I thought he doesn't apply a get. He doesn't hold of get. And that brisa discussed get. Let's relearn Reb Shimon's most recent formula, where it appeared to you that he wasn't applying any get. Just the opposite. Reb Shimon Omer, what Reb Shimon meant with his most recent formula, that we compare the situations to as nus, he meant like this: Asu bezdin bayra asan Kavanas ish be'isha uboya get. Just the opposite. Chachamim considered a marriage that took place through the hayra'ah of Bezdin, basically means she remarried on account of one aid, utilizing the authority of Bezdin, right? So it's basically saying one aid did it. Kekavanas ish be'isha. They consider that interaction as though a man would interact with a woman as married. The same kiddushin with kavana, with intent of kiddushin, where ubaya get, you need a get to dissolve that. It's just the opposite. If Shimon says you need a get. If it turns out that this information was faulty and she's faulted and she's held accountable, she needs a get from Shimon to get al-pi edim. But if it was through two edim, then we do away with it. It's not our fault. It's his own ish isha interacted, not for the sake of kedushin. But get, and no get is needed in that case here as well, since it was two edim, who in her mind were trustworthy. We don't take her to task, and she can go back to Ruvain. She doesn't need a get from Shimon. Bottom line is, but Shimon himself will make that distinction between when she is at fault, where you need to get from Shimon. It's part of the knas process, and where there were two edim, we don't apply the knas, and she can just go back home without a get. So bottom line is, that Bryce that we discussed, which makes that distinction between one eid and two edim, here you need to get, here you don't, perhaps it's Reb Shimon speaking, not the Rabbanan. And that's why Rav had to paskin like Reb Shimon, because there is no Rabbanan who say the same thing. Says the Gemara, another teres Rav Ashi Amar. He's again focusing on the formula presented by Reb Shimon. And he says, look, Le'inin is surah katani. No, actually, we're not discussing get here. He's speaking about the status of the Isha as per her going back to her husband. V'achika Amar, he meant like this. Also, Bezdin Bahira Asan, if it was through one aid, Kazad and Ish Isha. It says, though a man interacted with a married woman, b'mezit, u'misra bala. That makes her usher to go back to her husband. Here as well in our story, if the information turns out to be faulty, she can't go back home. Al-pi edim, but if the information was presented by two edim, which were reliable and trustworthy, then we don't hold her accountable. Kishigigas ish isha says, though generally a person would interact with ish ish b'shaygig. Mr. Abala, she's not usher on her husband, she should go back home. Okay, so interesting equation. Here she's usher to go back home, here not. But don't draw any conclusions regarding a get. See, the Gemara had a kasha before. If it's so comparable to znus, this is like a znus b'shoigig, this is like a znus b'mezid. Apparently there's no get, because by znus there's never a get. No, he's not discussing get. Maybe there is a get, maybe there is no get. He's just discussing one element. Isser, the Isser element. 1/8 results in Isser l'ba'ala. 2/8 does not result in Isser l'ba'ala. But perhaps when it comes to a get, maybe Reb Shimon would agree that when it was 1/8 and she's usher to go back home, we penalize her even with respect to having to go through the get process as well. So bottom line is, that brisa that draws the line between 1/8, which is usher to her husband, and she needs a get from the new husband, and 2/8, which she's held faultless, she can go back home, no get is required. Maybe it's Reb Shimon, not the Rabbanan. So you have no right, the Rabbanan agreed to this halacha. And that's why Rav had to stress that we hold of Reb Shimon. Ravina Amar, they need carbon katani. He has another approach to Reb Shimon's formula here. We're not speaking about get, not even speaking about her status as per her husband. We're speaking about whether or not she needs to bring a carbon as a result of this mishap. Linin carbon katani. So Reb Shimon says, also Bezdin Bahira Asan. We treat the episode which was generated by the Hayra'as Bezdin, meaning through an Eid Echad, which case she's held accountable for lack of, investigation, lack of conscientiousness. So we hold her accountable, and therefore she needs to bring a carbon. In this case, she doesn't even need to bring a carbon. Kazadin ish bi isha. It's like as nus b'mezid, v'lo masir carbon, and there is no carbon. Just like by mezid, there is no carbon. By mezid is too heavy for a carbon. He's undeserving of a carbon. So in a case where one aid allowed her to remarry, and this was through the Bezdin authority, so although she is held accountable, that's the irony here. It's almost a paradox. She's at fault. She becomes usher on her husband. She has to go through the get process, all the knas and all the yisurim. But a carbon, no carbon. There's a special halacha when a process was initiated by Bezdin. We learn from Psukim, we sort of attribute it to Bezdin, there is no carbon. As opposed to Alpi Edom. If two Edom were involved, so then, Keshigigas ish b'isha masir carbon, we treat it as though there was a znus. Generally, a znus committed b'shoigi, and there's a carbon chatas. So here, since Bezdin was not involved, it's totally her responsibility to look after it. She has to bring a chatas. Okay, that's all. That's all Rav Shimon was trying to tell us. He wasn't speaking about her status as per her husband's isser or get. And perhaps Rav Shimon would make that chiluk between the Eid Echad being mad to her, where she's at fault for going through with it, and she's usher on her husband's. They need a get from Shimon as well, as opposed to two Eidim allowing her to remarry. In that case, she's not at fault, and we say my havala lemeba, like Rav Sheshes said. What else could she have done? There were two Eidim, two upstanding fellows telling her to remarry. We consider like an oines, in which case, if it turns out that her husband was around, she can go back to him, and we don't require any get from Shimon. Just go back home. And again, bottom line is, it's Reb Shimon who makes that distinction, and therefore Rav had to trouble himself to say halacha like Reb Shimon in this case. Another approach can be applied to that brisa. The brisa said that all the arayish of Torah, through any sort of inappropriate interaction with an isha, through an erva, you don't need to get, except by the isha's ish, who married Alpi Bezdin. Right? So what does that mean? Says Ravina, you know what? No, not Ravina. Boyasema, another pshat in the Gemara. How come Rabbanon? Perhaps that brisa reflects Shitas Rabbanon. And you still can't prove anything with respect to the Rabbanon's opinion in a case where there was a heta through two Eidim. What's going to happen then? Do we treat her like an oines? We don't know. You know why? Because the brisa is not speaking about that. Actually, the brisa will include that case as well and say that case is also asa. So just backtrack for a second. No, the brisa will actually apply penalties to that isha as well. Truthfully, that brisa is reflective of Shitas Rabbanon. And still, you have no source in the world where the Rabbanon are absolving the isha if it came about through two Eidim. V'tritz hachi, and interpret the brisa like this. Add a vav, which changes the face of the brisa. Typically, by an avera of arayis, you don't do a get. There's no need. Chutz except me'ishes ish. An ishes ish who remarried thinking her husband passed away. An ishes ish who two Eidim came and told her about her husband's passing. So even in this case, we penalize her. She should have done a better job. She should have interrogated the Eidim. She should have verified the facts. So she's usher on her husband. She needs a get from Shimon, new husband. Visha nisasapi bezdin. The vav changes the whole story. Visha nisasapi bezdin. And likewise, a case of an isha who married by way of 1/8 with bezdin's allowance. So basically, this teretz changes the whole meaning of that first brisa. We thought the brisa was drawing that line, making that chiluk between the case of the 1/8 which she's held accountable, the case of the 2/8 in which she's faultless. No, we put it all together with a vav achivur in both cases. We treat her the same way. End of the day, you should have done a better job. End of the day, we apply all the penalties to discourage others from being so careless. Okay, so let's stop for a second. Let's backtrack. Rav tells us that 2 Eidim, she's faultless. Says Rav Sheshes, Of course. Why even mention it? What else should she have done? My Havala Mebat. She's an Einus. Leave her alone. Let her go back home. Skip the process of the Knas and the Einus and the Isurim and the Gittin. It's a Pashat Svara. Number one. Number two, there's a Brisa that already teaches us that. That Brisa is the Rabbanon speaking. The Brisa which says that by one aid, of course, she suffers the consequences, but by two aidim, what more could she have done? There are no ramifications whatsoever. So if Teshis has two kashas, one is a svara, isn't it obvious? It's pashut. Why would you think otherwise? And number two, there's a brisa to support this halacha, which seems to be reflective of even Shittas Rabbanan. Nobody takes issue with this brisa. Oh, that's not so simple. Perhaps the brisa is Reb Shimon. Perhaps the brisa has to could be reworded. So that kasha from the brisa sort of fell by the wayside. Now comes the svara. Sheshes begins by saying, look, isn't it obvious? My havala mevad. Well, what else could she have done? We need to absolve her. The Gemara will challenge that svara right now. Is that a true substantiated svara? Just because she had two eidim, does that mean that she's totally absolved? Maybe she should have done a better job. You see, it turned out that the eidim were false. Do you really apply that argument? What could I have done? But I'll prove to you from Mishnah after Mishnah after Mishnah that it's not so. You could have done a better job, and you have to suffer the consequences. Listen to this Mishnah. So instead of writing dating the get properly based on the king that's reigning at that moment, they wrote, it's been 100 years since Rome took over, and it's called Malchus She'ein Hagenes. Rashi says it's a malchus. The kingdom don't even have their own. They don't even have their own language. It's a conglomerate of all kinds of languages. They don't have their language. They don't have their script, the alphabet. So that's not a proper dating of the get. L'shei malchus Madai, who picked some other malchus out of his hat. He wrote based on the years of Madai. L'shei malchus Yavan, the binyan Abayis, the churban Abayis. It's so many years since the Beis Hamikdash was built or destroyed. It was an improperly written get. Or he switched the locations. Hayeva Mizrach. So the fellow lived in the east, because of Marav, and in the get he wrote Marav. But Marav lived in the west, because of Mizrach, he wrote Mizrach. And the Isha took the get and remarried. What happens? She must leave Shimon and Reuven, and all the penalties applied in our Mishnah applies there as well. That's the Mishnah. Vamai, why? Why is she penalized? We should apply the argument of my havala mebat. What could she have done? She's not at fault. Nah, big difference. By us, we have two edim. That's the epitome of ne'emanos. But over there, she should have taken the get and read the get, or read it to a chacham, Rashi says, and confirmed that the get is fine. That's an easy process. Before you go and you act upon the get and remarry, you make sure it's a proper get. So over there, she's at fault. But by two edim, totally faultless and absolved. I'll bring you another right. That is not so. This fellow passed away without children, left behind two Yevamos, Rachel and Leah. Rachel went for a Yibum, and we know that when one Yevama has Yibum, the Tzara, the contemporary wife, the other wife, the counterpart, doesn't have to have anything anymore. She's Pater. So the Tzara, the counterpart wife, went ahead, Venices, and she married out, which is a lav. And Rashi says, we're going here according to Rabbi Kiva, considers a lav as severe as erva, and it turns out the whole thing never started. V'nimtzezu islandess. Rachel turned out to be an islandess, unable to bear children, in which case Yibum applied to her as worthless. In which case Leah should have had her own Yibum. And now she's remarried. She has to leave both husbands, the new husband, and she can't go back to the Yavam. She gets all the penalties in the Mishnah. What should she have done? Of course she could have done something. Iboy lalam tuni, patience. She should have waited it out. Waited until her contemporary, the other Isha, turns 20 or whatever age you can, identify and discern whether she's an islandess or not. There's a way of figuring it out. You see the simanim on the Isha. So over there, she's held accountable. But by the Edom, in our case, no. Omar by Toshma, here comes another raya. That an Isha is held accountable. Kol harayos she'amru poiters terasein. So Reuben passed away, left behind Rachel and Leah. Rachel was a relative of his brother Shimon, so she's an erva. Just as the erva is pater from Yibum, the other Isha, Leah, is pater as well. So kol harayos she'amru poiters terasein, all the araya situations who exempt their tzaris, holchut tzaris, v'nisu. Leah went and married out, thinking that Rachel, her contemporary, exempted her. Turned out it was a mistake. V'nimtzu elu islandess. And the erva turned out to be an islandess. She wasn't part of the equation. An islandess, Rashi says, is mekach tos. Reuben never was married to her. It was a mistake to begin with. He wouldn't have married her had he known that she was an islandess, unable to bear children. So she wasn't really part of the equation ever. So Leah is really a regular Yevamos, and she married out. What does she do now? She suffers the consequence. Why? Why is she penalized? Nema, we should say, what could she have done? Same teretz as before. She should have waited it out and discerned whether the Isha, the erva, is an islandess. Amarav Tashma, comes another raya. Cause of Sefer. Get li'ish. Sefer says down, writes a get for the man. V'shever li'isha, a receipt for the woman that she will give to the man upon receiving her ksuba money. V'ta, he made a big mistake. He switched it around. Upon delivery, he gave this to that and that to this. If it doesn't get li'ish, he gave the get to the isha. This is the sefer, right? V'shever li'ish, he gave the receipt to the man, and then they swapped. V'nosnu zelazeh, v'zelazeh, they swapped documents. Never bothered to read the documents. It turns out that the man got the get, not the isha. She remarried based on this get. La'achazman. After a while, it turns out they discover haraya get ish. The get is in the man's hands. The receipt in the woman's hands. She's penalized. All the halachas in the Mishnah apply. She leaves both husbands. All the isurim apply. Why? Why is she at fault? What could I have done? Neymar, we should say, what could she have done? You know what? She should have at least glanced at the get. Take a quick glance at it, scan it, and see what it is. Be responsible. So of course she's at fault. But in our Mishnah, there were two Edom testified about her husband's passing. Why should she second guess the Edom? So perhaps in our Mishnah it's different. Amar Vashi Toshma, here's another raya that she's held at fault. Shina Shma Yushma. The Sefer switched around the names. So he wrote a different name for the man, Ushma, a different name for the woman, Shem Iroi, V'Shem Iro. He made a mistake regarding their hometowns. Teitze Mizeo Mizeh. Once again, if she used that get, which was a puzzle get, she remarries, she has to leave her husband, and she's penalized. Why? Nema, we should say, what could she have done? She didn't write the get. Answer is yes. She should have read the get before using it. Amar Ravina Tashma, have another raya that she's held accountable. Kansa beget kirech. The Chachamim made a special takana. They knew that Kehanim are, very conscientious and sometimes perhaps a bit irritable, and therefore they, out of concern that the Kohen might just divorce his wife at whim, they prolonged the process. They made it a lengthy process. You have to sign a name and then fold it and sign another aid and fold it again. It's a whole long deal. Now, if they skipped some of the signatures, it's called a get kireach, a bald get, which we consider puzzle. Let's say they used that type of get, kansa beget kireach. So she got this get thinking she was divorced. She went and she remarried. In any case, she suffers the same deal, all the penalties. Why? Why is she at fault? She didn't write the get. The same Torah says before, she should have had the get read and confirmed its kashrus. But when it comes to our sugya, two Edom came and told her about her husband's passing. Why should she question their testimony? And therefore, at least according to Rav and Rav Sheshes, she's unaffected by this episode, she can go back home. A korban she brings. Because at the end of the day, she did an avera which wasn't forced upon her. That's the halacha. A korban you still have to bring. But in terms of applying a penalty, a knas, that's only to a person who did an isser. A person who was negligent. She wasn't. There were two Adam that allowed her to remarry. The Gemara soon will switch that. Amar le Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. Sorry. Rav Papa Savar L'Me'eved Uvda. So in fact, Rav Papa adopted this opinion. He says, look, he had a story with an Isha who remarried as a result of two Adam. So he wanted to follow through this halacha. Two Adam allowed to remarry. Her husband turned up. She can go back home. But my Havel Mevet, applying this formula of my Havel Mevet, what could she have done? She's absolved. There's no reason to apply a penalty. Amalei Rav Huna. Breder Rishos, he asked Rav Papa, Vatanya Kolahani Masnaisa. What about all these Mishnahs and Brises? We penalize her in any case. Amalei, he says, what do you mean? We have already answered those Brises and those Mishnahs. V'lav Shaninu, haven't we answered them already? And every one of those missions, she's at fault for being negligent. But in our case, two Adam, it's different. So he responded, I understand. We know we have an answer, but who says those answers are grounded answers? Vashinuye. Just because we have these answers, we're going to go rely on those answers. Vashinuye leiku v'lismach. We're going to rely on those answers. We had a kasha, so we answered, but perhaps those answers weren't really substantiated, because the truth is that in any case, even with two Adam, really, she could have looked into it a little better. And we don't just say, my Havel Mev, what could I have done? And therefore, even in the case of two Adam, she should be penalized. And in fact, Rav Papa accepted it. Upasak, he refrained. He didn't follow through. He did not allow her to go back to her husband. Okay, so what did we learn today? We started with the Isha. His husband turned up. We penalize her. She loses the ksuba rights, the truma, the meiser, etc., etc. We have in the Mishnah Rabbi Yesi, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yesi says she gets her ksuba from her first husband. Rabbi Lezer says he can have her mitzvah, masu yadayim. Rabbi Shimon says upon his passing, yibum is applied. According to one version of the Gemara, the later Tanoim agree with the earlier ones. According to Rabbi Yechon, it's the other way. The earlier ones with the later ones. We have all kinds of svaros and arguments in either direction. Now, we have two distinct cases in the Mishnah. She married by way of an Eid Echad, or by way of two Eidim. So now, let's first start with the easy halacha, korban. If it was one Eid, that's called Al-Pi Bezdin. Bezdin gave her that push. She's absolved from korban. Special halacha, Al-Pi Bezdin, there's no korban. But if it was two Eidim that allowed to remarry, technically, she did not need the heter of Bezdin, so don't get Bezdin involved. Turns out that it was mistaken, she has to bring a korban. Now what about the Isurim and the Knossos and the penalties and all those consequences mentioned in the Mishnah? When does it apply? So if it was one Eid that allowed her to remarry, that's based on the fact that she will investigate the matter further, which she obviously didn't do. We penalize her. Leave both husbands. She needs a get from the second husband, etc. What if there were two Eidim? So Rav says, go back home. Two Eidim. That's the epitome of trustworthiness. Go back home. Rav Sheish is passing like that as well. My Havel Mevet, it's an oinus, but the maskana, the Gemara, no, it's not so simple. We're not so sure about that, and therefore we didn't allow the Isha to go back home, and in fact that's how we pass on Shulchan Aruch. That even if there were two Eidim, she still could have done a better job and investigated and confirmed prior to remarrying. We should always have Psuras Tayvais. Much hatzlacha to you. Be well.